Focus on symptoms and not a diagnosis. This is one of the big switches that I made in my recovery journey that I believe really excelled my health and put me on the right pathway when it came to achieving long-term results. Have you ever noticed that there appears to be two different groups of people out there, one of which are a group with multiple health ailments who experience ongoing health struggles, and the other group are those who seem to just be able to get on with life without even having to think twice about what's going on within their body? When you look at somebody with a chronic condition, they never tend to experience just one single symptom in isolation. It's always a multitude of symptoms. And with that observation, I think there's one very crucial question that we should all be asking ourselves. And that is the following. If one group of people never experience any notable health complaints, and the other continuously experiences an array of symptoms involving multiple regions of the body, is the likelihood that that group of people have developed multiple separate diagnoses throughout their body, or is it more likely that all these symptomatic areas are connected, and that the hub that's connecting them might be encountering issues that's not allowing it to function optimally, thus resulting in a multitude of undesirable downstream effects? Having this outlook straight away changes the entire game for you, because instead of focusing on a million different things that may or may not be going wrong within your body, you instead decide to shift your goal to focus on the one thing that, if addressed, can go on to have significant collateral effects on multiple systems throughout your body. But how can you know for sure what this one thing actually is that really needs addressing? Well, that's where the title of this video specifically really comes into the equation. Because believe it or not, in a funny sense, symptoms are actually your friend. Not in the way that they make you feel, obviously, but in the respect that each and every one offers its own individual clue that can help to point you in the direction of the underlying dysfunction that's actually the thing that needs addressing. Each symptom is its own piece of evidence, and when all of these have been thoroughly assessed and the link is established between them, that can provide you with the answers to your chronic condition that you've been looking to obtain all along. A little bit like one of those criminal forensic boards where all of the clues eventually all point towards the same prime suspect. So when I say focus on your symptoms, I don't mean overly fixate and become hyper attentive and aware of them. What I really mean is leverage them. See if any of them exist alongside one another whenever they emerge, or if there's anything that you do in particular that seems to trigger their onset. And what you'll probably end up noticing is that your digestive pains, for example, don't just exist in isolation, but alongside them, you also experience the likes of shortness of breath, a tight neck, blurry vision, a change in mood, a rapid heart rate. You get the idea. So be a detective. Next time your chronic symptoms flare up, try your best to identify each and every abnormal and uncomfortable sensation that arises throughout your body and document this information. And the reason for this is because all of this data later down the line can be very useful when it actually comes to achieving long-term and lasting results with your chronic condition. Just before I continue, if you are somebody who's serious about fast-tracking your way to a far less symptomatic future and attaining considerable alleviation from your chronic condition, then I highly recommend checking out the Unbeatable Blueprint online course. This is where I discuss why the symptoms behind many long-standing autonomic and autoimmune conditions continue to manifest, and I provide you with a step-by-step plan of exactly what you need to do to have the best chance of achieving long-term recovery from them. Now, the reason why I believe that concentrating on symptoms as opposed to a diagnosis is advantageous when it comes to recovery is because symptoms are basically outward projections being produced as a result of the underlying dysfunction, whereas a diagnosis is literally a word that lumps together a set of symptoms. And more often than not, this doesn't give us nearly as much information that we require to actually get deep down to the root cause of the problem. So instead of hunting to accumulate a list of diagnoses, what I found to be far more beneficial was to closely observe my symptoms, see whereabouts they happened in my body, which side of my body they happened on, and whether I did anything prior to their onset or I was in a particular environment that seemed to trigger the symptoms themselves. After taking all of this information on board over the period of multiple months, I had assembled what I believed to be a fairly accurate representation of the way my body behaved, which included the undesirable symptoms that it continued to produce. Having gathered this information, my next goal was to see if I could locate somebody who was able to identify what it was that was linking all of these symptoms together. So I ended up approaching a board-certified chiropractic neurologist. And the reason as to why I approached this type of practitioner specifically was because the purpose of the thorough neurological and physical exam that they carried out was to check for any abnormal outputs that the brain was creating within the body. And with that data, what they then do is work backwards by following the same neuronal pathway further upstream to find out which specific area of the brain or nervous system is functioning suboptimally and is thus responsible for creating that undesirable symptom within the body. And once they're able to establish the link between your symptoms and uncover the precise origin of the dysfunction within your neural networks, they can then go on to prescribe you with very targeted neurological exercises, which in turn should allow you to gradually correct the dysfunction, leading to balancing out of multiple systems throughout your body. And in turn, this should end up providing you with a significant decrease in the frequency and severity of the symptoms that you experience. So yes, although you do technically come out of the other end of the assessment with a diagnosis, it isn't one of these conventional diagnoses of POTS, CFS, ME, or dysautonomia, for example, but a diagnosis that actually pinpoints the exact area of the problem. And that's when I suddenly realized, after all of these years, that the main reason why the vast majority of those suffering with a chronic health ailment weren't making any real improvements with their condition was because they were focusing on so many things to try to get better, whilst simultaneously being completely unaware of what it actually was that needed addressing in the first place. They end up fixating a lot on the diagnosis or diagnoses that they were originally given, which ironically ends up pushing them further away from the inner circle, which actually represents getting to the root cause of the problem and knowing what to do to address it. Symptoms, on the other hand, never lie, and they're a fantastic resource for us to leverage in order to hone in on the precise location of the dysfunction that needs addressing, either existing within our central or peripheral nervous system. However, it goes without saying that this video is purely for those of you with a chronic ailment who are looking to get to the root cause of the issue. If you've started to experience an acute illness or infection, then please make sure you seek out immediate medical attention.